The Opryland is a great example of how wigs can be aligned across multiple levels of an organization to create powerful results. Located in Nashville, Tennessee, it's the largest convention hotel outside of Las Vegas. It has 14 restaurants, its own police force, its own power plant. It's like an indoor city. To say they felt pulled in a lot of different directions would be an understatement. When we started working with senior leadership, they dedicated a day to determine their high-level wigs. And looking for an overall property-level wig, they looked at occupancy rate, revenue flow-through, 200 new rooms that were under construction, and a myriad of other options. Eventually, they settled on guest satisfaction. They felt it was the one goal that would have the biggest impact on everything else. At the time, only 42% of the guests gave them a perfect score. They had never been higher than a 44, but wanted to get to a 55 to be higher than either of their sister properties. Choosing this primary wig was only the beginning. Just because an organization has an overarching focal point doesn't prevent it from still over-goaling the organization. There's a great question that we have used for 15 years when it comes to this issue. It was originally asked by an engineer in the 60s who was working for NASA when NASA was trying to go to the moon. Here's the question. What are the fewest battles necessary to win the war? He didn't ask, what's everything we need to do to get to the moon? He asked, what's the fewest battles we need to get to the moon? NASA came up with 3: navigation, propulsion, and life support. Navigation, because the moon isn't standing still, right? It's like shooting a bullet with a bullet. Propulsion, right? Because they had to get to 25,000 miles an hour to break Earth's gravitational pull. And life support, because they had no idea how to keep astronauts alive in deep space. This little analogy is often very compelling for senior leaders. Opryland had their man on the moon statement, but they hadn't figured out the fewest number of battles they needed to achieve that wig. After looking at more than 20 options, senior leadership finally narrowed to 3 battles. First, problem resolution. It's an indoor city. Something's always going to go wrong. How they responded is a big deal. Second, arrival experience is key. Most people make up their mind about a hotel very quickly. Once you've decided, it's very difficult to get you to change your mind. Finally, and interestingly enough, food and beverage quality. Because it's so difficult to eat off property, and because the Opryland's food is kind of pricey, they knew if it wasn't really good, no one was going to give them a perfect score. The executive team ended up with a few brief statements to describe the battles that needed to be won, but it took them almost 9 hours to get there, right? It looks like you could have written this on a napkin in 30 seconds, but this was not trivial. This narrowing process allowed senior leadership to then communicate these battles to 70 functional teams that reported into that executive team. Each of those 70 teams was asked to pick one wildly important goal in order to drive one of those key battles. 3 of the 70 examples included room availability, luggage delivery, and check-in time. Apparently, people hate it when their room isn't ready. That's room availability. Luggage delivery was at 106 minutes. That's not an exaggeration. There would sometimes be piles of luggage from tourist buses that would hit the lobby. If your bag got caught in there, you weren't going to see that bag for a couple of hours. Each team chose one wildly important goal in each of these 3 categories in addition to their day job. The other interesting thing about this story is that it's the first time that we at Franklin Covey chose to have those 70 leaders roll out the process. They were the ones, the 70 leaders were the ones, not Franklin Covey, that brought the 4 disciplines and these goals to their teams. We wanted their buy-in. 9 months into this process, they were not at a 55 for guest satisfaction. They were at a 61. Their 2 sister properties, the one in Orlando and the one in Dallas, hadn't moved a tick on customer satisfaction in 9 months. The Opryland had moved from a 42 to a 61. Remember, they had never been higher than a 44. This was almost a 50% net improvement across a gigantic operation. Now, we'd been teaching them the power of focus, but in the end, we were the ones that were stunned. Now, if you want to watch the little video on the Opryland, it's in your resource materials. Pay attention to the end of the video. Instead of showing the credits, we roll through the results at the team level. It's really powerful to see this. Luggage delivery, for instance, had dropped from 106 minutes to 12 minutes when we came back to make that video. This overwhelming success started with a few wildly important goals at the top level of the organization. And remember, that took 9 hours to lock in. Not surprising. That general manager told us this was the most valuable day his senior leadership team had ever spent together. Discipline 1 is powerful. We are translating conceptual strategy and complexity into the fewest number of executable targets at the front line of the organization. Execution doesn't like complexity. The two best friends of execution are simplicity and transparency.